বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Welcome to the Hindu analysis for 24th June 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. Banks gets asset worth 8,441 crore from Enforcement Directorate. So the Enforcement Directorate has transferred assets that were seized from economic offenders to public sector banks. We know that because of various frauds committed by businessmen such as Vijay Mallya, Nirav Modi, Choksi and so on, who have all fled overseas, escaping prosecution in India, have suffered an estimated amount of 22,000 crore losses due to these financial frauds. Now, when criminal proceedings were initiated against these accused people of financial fraud, immediately in order to protect, the ED had seized a lot of assets belonging to these individuals. Now, through a series of judgments and tribunal proceedings, the ED has initiated the process of transferring the seized assets to the banks which these people cheated out of. Now, recently, the agency, prior to this 8,400 crore transfer, had transferred an attached shares worth of 6,600 crore rupees to State Bank of India and other banks which lended out money to these people as a group of consortium. Now, this was done according to a PMLA special court judgment. On Wednesday, again in this process, the Debt Recovery Tribunal, on behalf of the consortium is nothing but, since the money or the loan that is being given out is such a huge money, generally these kinds of loans are not given by a single bank. What happens is 2-3 banks get to form a group or a consortium, and they then lend out the money. Let us say I'm a businessman who is asking for a loan of, let us say, 5,000 crore rupees. I approach State Bank of India. State Bank of India, willing not to take the risk that involves in lending out 5,000 crore rupees. Generally what happens is the State Bank of India or the businessman himself may approach 3 or 4 banks and asking them to put up certain portion of the entire loan amount. That is how a consortium of banks is formed, and that is how such huge loans are given by multiple banks under a leading bank with a consortium group. So, particularly with the Debt Recovery Tribunal asking on this, when these consortiums try to recover the money that is owed to them, the Debt Recovery Tribunal recently gave out a judgment stating that you have to sell the UBC, which is owned by Vijay Mallya, that is Kingfisher Breweries or United Breweries, and the shares were sold under the Recovery Tribunal, and a sum of 5,824 crore was further released back to the banks which are owned money by these people. Now again, they are going to sell few more shares to recover 8,000 crores, which is expected to be done by June 25. As on date, total attachment worth 18,170 crore assets, which were assets valued at 329.67 crores have been confiscated, and properties worth 9,000 crore, amounting to anywhere between 40 to 50% of the total loss to the banks, have been handed over to them. Meaning, out of the 22,000 crore that is owned to all these banks by these people, only 40% of the amount has been recovered. The rest has yet to be recovered and most likely may not be recovered. Now, as part of the investigation that ED has initiated, the ED took steps to attach or seize assets worth 18,000 crore, which is far less than the total amount given to these people. But nonetheless, these kinds of initiation of action or attachment of or seizure of assets of accused financial offenders is a positive sign towards recovery of this loan amount, because the impact that NPAs had on our financial sector, particularly banking sector, has been huge. Though these recoveries may not help in the long run, or at least in a great way, but nonetheless, it shows that the government is committed towards bring these offenders to justice. You know how the government of India is engaging with the United Kingdom's government to bring back Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi. How we are negotiating with the Karakoram countries to bring back Choksi. But nonetheless, this is a long drawn process, and one step in this long drawn process is attachment and seizure of assets and transferring money that these banks are owed when the sale of assets is done. So that's the issue here. Moving on to the next article, the Kashmir outreach and the Afghan storm. So, on August 5th, 2019, the Indian government amended Article 370. When this was being done, the Honorable Home Minister spoke that there are three objectives behind the decision to amend Article 370 on that particular day. One of the three objectives that the Home Minister stated in the Parliament are flooding the region with development initiatives and investment from other parts of the country, reclaiming those parts of the territory that are now occupied by Pakistan and China, Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Aksai Chin by China, and ending the rule of political dynasties in Jammu and Kashmir. And this entire process is being done to favor or bring in a new Kashmir called Naya Kashmir. Now it has been 2 years since this decision has been taken. 2 years is a small time to state whether these changes had taken place or not, and given the pandemic situation and how the pandemic has upended the entire Indian economy, which was already in downtrend, these objectives which the Home Minister stated during the amendment of Article 370 may not have translated to fruition in reality, because there are hundreds and hundreds of challenges in the path, and the biggest of all was the pandemic itself. Now, as far as the government's claim, it claims that more than 400 companies are willing to invest or are promising to invest in Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. But as far as now, nothing has been concrete enough or has translated into real money on the ground. That too, this statement was before pandemic, and you know how Indian economy is in right now, and how hard cash flows are into companies right now is investments, that is. Now, as far as the promise or the statement that we are going to retake our own territory from the hands of Pakistani or the Chinese is more difficult now than ever before, because we know the LA situation right now. Because since April 2020, China has stepped up their offensive there. They are occupying a lot of territory of India. And their unwillingness to even acknowledge or negotiate our concerns is the biggest threat India faces right now. So, when we said that we are going to said that the August 5th decision was an internal one, though it is an internal one nonetheless, because Jammu and Kashmir is an internal issue, the problem with that decision was, or the problem with the entire region itself is, it, for some or the other reason, it got tied up with the regional security matrix. What do you mean by that? So on the one hand you have Pakistan, on the other hand you have LAC situation with China. Even our army is aware that, or even the CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, has come out and said that when you talk about a military intervention with either Pakistan or China, it means that we are going to have a two-front war situation. So it is unlikely that now Pakistan is more dangerous than the Chinese. That was the earlier statement. Now, what is the statement from Indian security perspective? Compared to Pakistan, China is more dangerous and China is at our throat right now. So it is no longer an internal issue, right? Pakistan is using all its assets, both state and non-state actors, to get Kashmir into more trouble in day out. Yesterday there was an attack where a cell phone shop operator was shot on the mere suspicion that he was working with Indian security agencies. There was no proof that he was working with Indian security agencies, but nonetheless he was shot and he got killed. So when Article 370 was amended and the special status was taken away and the statehood was taken away, the perception that the Indian government had was that we are going to see a reduction in terrorist activities. But when you look at the data, there is still a high percentage of terrorist activity taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. And the leverage that India had was the hope that with the reduction in security threats, investment will grow. But that did not happen because of the pandemic and various other reasons. All while we have the security issue. And while all these things were going on, China decided that we are going to get back some territory from India. Now, it is no longer an internal issue despite whether we like it or not, because it got entangled with the regional security aspect of it. So the statement that J&K dispute has been discussed at least 3 times in UN Security Council can be observed with 2 lenses. One, it has been brought up by China 3 times or 2 times because of the compulsions with Pakistanis. See, that has no bearing at the overall picture of things. You have to let that slide. But what you look at it is how Indian government has been behaving since the last 6 months. Right? When Article 370 was amended and the special status and the constitution, the entire thing or the entire old structure was taken away, we kind of did something that we are not used to. Right? So understand this. The pattern was, we used to initiate talks with Pakistan. Pakistan used to say we are going to find a resolution for Jammu and Kashmir. The moment India came back, they used to carry out a terror attack. India used to say, India used to reiterate that you have to stop terror to have talks. And we used to again ask them for peaceful resolutions. Again, we would have dialogue with them. We would come back with certain promises from the Pakistani side stating that we are no longer going to carry out terrorist attacks. The moment Indian delegation came back to India, there would be a terror attack. So it was like terror talks, terror. So it was a vicious cycle that Pakistan controlled. When the Indian government decided that we are going to do away with all these articles and whatnot, we turned the tables on them. Now they are stuck in a quandary right now. See, if they agree with Article 370 amendment and special status and statehood, they are going to get their back kicked in Pakistan. If they push back more, they have the threat of US pushing a little hard on them. And the FAFTA blacklisting is also hovering over their heads. But right now, with Americans' decision to pull out of Afghanistan, one pressure point on Pakistan has been taken away. Now, in all the articles that we discussed till now, it is easy to simplify what would be the end result of America pulling out of Afghanistan. One, whether or from whatever perspective you observe, Taliban is going to get stronger. The moment Taliban becomes stronger, Pakistan can play a major role in Afghanistan. Number 2, India's interests in Afghanistan are at stake. So when Taliban becomes stronger in Afghanistan, that gives Pakistan a bigger leverage against India. It directly translates to China's leverage in Afghanistan against India. So China will in effect have 2 pressure points. One is the LAC area that is the Afghan area. So we are stuck in a very bad place right now when you look at the security matrix. See, let me give you one example. When Donald Trump was president, when the concept of Quad was materializing, the entire dialogue was hinging on the fact of security. He did not talk about climate change. He did not talk about this, that, we should do that, we should do this, we should come together, economy, supply chain, nothing. He was simply speaking about security aspect of Indo-Pacific region. He was talking about using Indian assets and consolidating Indian assets or backing up Indian assets against as a counter to China. That was Trump. That was what Trump was talking about. His Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was vocal about stating that Quad is nothing but a security matrix or security grouping. The moment the transition happened from Donald Trump to Biden, never in the statements from the Biden administration was the word security seen. Even in the Quad meeting that we had with the heads of the states of 4 nations, we talked about climate change. The security aspect was not even brought up in the agenda or in the joint statement or any other forum. So we were hoping that the Quad would be, we were saying on the outside that a Quad is a economic grouping and winking and saying that yeah, it's a security to counter China or encircle China. So the problem comes now, India doesn't have assurances from the United States as to will they support us if and when push comes to shove with China. See, the Pentagon operates independent of United States administration. That is Art Garner's truth. You have to understand there are certain dynamics in the United States military establishment itself, not even military, where certain decisions are not taken in the White House. So, if really India gets into a confrontation with China, no doubt the military departments of United States will help us because they are already helping us with logistics and some intelligence. But that can only come when we go to a confrontation posture with China. But when you come to the diplomatic aspect of it, wording does play a lot of importance. So when you talk about Quad grouping, you have to talk about the concept of security also. So one of the things that is happening right now is when United States is saying that we are going to pull out of Afghanistan, India's own interests are threat here. How do you can ask me, how are you saying that Indian interests are at stake in Afghanistan? So look at the actions of Indian government recently. We are deciding that we are going to close 2 consulates in Afghanistan, that is Jalalabad and Herat areas. Why? We are saying that it is of coronavirus pandemic, but in reality, in these 2 areas, the Afghan government is unable to guarantee the safety of our consulate or embassy staff. So we are moving out of our own embassies and consulate because there is a clear threat of attacks happening on those consulates or embassies in Afghanistan. So that is one issue. The second thing that is happening is we always said that we are not going to engage with Taliban. What happened recently? We had a statement from Qatar internal agency's envoy stating that Indian officials met Taliban political leadership in Doha in Qatar. So these two instances or news alone indicates that India's policy in Afghanistan is shifting because of safety concerns with the phased pull out of US troops from Afghanistan. Now let's come back to the concept of Pakistan. We were talking about how we turned tables on Pakistan with the amendment of Article 370. They are stuck in a bad place because it's a political suicide if they say that they are going to negotiate with India irrespective of what the Article 370 or special status to Jammu and Kashmir is at. So you see that their foreign ministry is saying one thing, Their military leadership, which actually rules Pakistan, says one thing, the Prime Minister says one thing. But with the back channel negotiations that we have, see, I told you, right, we have the real threat of a two-front war with two countries, but that is with both of our neighbors. That is why India is actively engaging in back channel negotiations with Pakistan. And one of the positive outcomes of that Pakistan back channel negotiations is this year's February ceasefire that is still in effect. So what the author is trying to say here is, things are not the same as they were in 2019. Things have changed in terms of pandemic, in terms of US decision to pull out. So whatever the decisions that the Indian government made in regards with Article 370 2 years back, are the conditions under which Indian government made those decisions are not the same today. So India has to adapt, and things are a little bit more complicated. So that's the conclusion. India has to think of its internal security. Overall, India's security interests are bit by bit being dragged into the regional security matrix. So moving on to the next article, HC declines Facebook and WhatsApp's fresh plea. So the Delhi High Court had declined Facebook and WhatsApp requests seeking to put a hold on the notice issued by the Competition Commission of India, where the Competition Commission of India has asked both Facebook and WhatsApp to submit certain documents on its part or to help its investigation into WhatsApp new privacy policy. So that's it. So the Competition Commission of India is engaging in a probe to study whether the WhatsApp privacy policy or the new privacy policy of WhatsApp is infringing on rules of Indian law. In regards to that, they wanted that the Facebook and WhatsApp wanted that request to be put on hold, but the Delhi High Court said there is no doubt that the notice that was issued by the Competition Commissioner of India, Director General, was a step in furtherance of the investigation commenced as a part of its day-to-day duties. So there's nothing more to it. It's just this article is to let you know that not only the WhatsApp privacy policy is being looked upon by the Indian government, certain actions were also initiated in part of that or in lieu of that. So moving on to the next article, IAF Navy match skills with US team. So the Indian Navy and Air Force began a 2-day exercise called Passage Exercise on Wednesday with the United States Navy carrier strike group called Ronald Reagan. So the carrier strike group, which is designated as Ronald Reagan, is passing through the Indian Ocean region. When it is transiting the Indian Ocean region, Indian Navy and Indian Air Force are coordinating a exercise with this carrier strike group that is passing our territory. Now, what is the reason of this exercise? Now, the exercise aim is to strengthen the bilateral relationships and cooperations, and it's a way to demonstrate our ability and integrate with their abilities and come out with a coordinate and comprehensive maritime operational situational understanding. So I said a lot of words in it. Our operating procedures are different. Their operating procedures are different. So when you talk about any military unit, they have their own operating procedures. So when you talk about exercises with other countries, the idea behind such exercises is to us understanding their operating procedures, them understanding our operating procedures, and when two countries involve in exercises as such, we communicate and coordinate with each other, and we develop a mutual understanding for our operating procedures. In layman's terms, they'll understand what we do, we'll understand what they do. So in future, if there is a need for both of our Navy and Air Force to work with United States Navy, we can simply start working with them. We don't have to learn new things, because in the past we conducted many exercises with them. We know what their operating procedures are and how they operate, how they work. So we don't need to learn anything new. We'll simply get integrated and we'll function as a single unit. That is the reason why we do these exercises. The idea is that if and when a situation arises when both Indian Navy and American Navy has to work together as single unit, we won't have any problems in communicating. That is how integration of multiple navies gets done. That is the reason why we do pilot these kinds of exercises. So Indo-Pacific has become the money word right now, and this particular Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group is an integral component of Indo-Pacific outreach of United States government. This is a US Air Force aircraft carrier. This is one of the biggest aircraft carriers in US Navy. So our aircraft conducting maritime and Air Force operations, aerial operations with these carrier strike group is a means for our armed forces to engage with their armed forces. So that's the entire reason. And as far as the US carrier strike group called Ronald Reagan, it involves a Nimitz class aircraft carrier called Ronald Reagan. And it also has a guided missile destroyer called USS Halsey, and it has also a guided missile cruiser called USS Silo, and it has a it is comprised of F-18 fighter jets and E-2C Hawkeye, which is an early warning aircraft. So this is an integral part as to how India will coordinate with US Navy when US Navy is conducting freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea. That's the goal here. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, but at the end of the day, it is our naval armed forces understanding how to function with other nations' armed forces. Moving on to the next article, China raising new units near borders. So China is raising new militia units entirely comprising of local Tibetan youth for high altitude warfare. In recent news, you might have heard about a special frontier force of Indian Army. This special frontier force is entirely comprised of youth from Ladakh and other areas and Tibet. These youth or they are essentially raising a militia. What SSF is a special forces unit comprising of entirely highly trained commandos. So China is doing the same thing, but instead they are going for a militia kind of a unit from recruiting local youth, because we know that one of the deficiencies of PLA is that they are not acclimatized to high altitude warfare. To counter that, to build their capacity in that region, in high altitude region, they are training these new units of militia. So it is learned that 2 batches of these militia units have been trained successfully so far, and they have been deployed in borders with Sikkim, Bhutan and other areas. That's the available information with us, and it seems that China is trying to match up Indian resources in terms of mountain warfare and high altitude warfare with these 2 new units. Moving on to the next article, Jaishankar flags close-up deployments. So Mr. R, Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister, was speaking at an event called Qatar Economic Forum on Tuesday, and a question was raised in regards with India's situation with China in the border. So the foreign minister, though reacted very sharply to the questions, his answers seems to be indicating what the government stance is right now, stating that China is continuously deploying soldiers at borders, despite saying that we are not going to deploy further more resources in border areas. That was given in a written statement to us in one of the commander level talks. But though we have a written word stating that we are not going to deploy any more forces or resources in border areas, China is continually doing the same. So again, this is an issue, or this can be considered as a provocative action from the Chinese side. As far as the Chinese stand, they have reacted very sharply to our foreign minister's statement, stating that whatever deployment China is doing, we are doing it to prevent further encroachment from the Indians into the Chinese territory. See, the stalemate still continues, despite what statements both foreign ministers or what both governments says. Situation is very critical at this point of time in terms of LAC right now. So moving on, EC speeding up delimitation process. We were talking about how delimitation process is the next step in restoration of statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. Before that, elections has to take place. Now, in a bid to speed up the process of delimitation of the assembly and parliament constituencies of Jammu and Kashmir, the Deputy Election Commissioner of Jammu and Kashmir has conducted a virtual meeting with DCs of territories of Jammu and Kashmir, and now they are going to initiate the process as to how to achieve the delimitation process in a faster or a short period of time. Now this is the first such meeting when the delimitation process has been discussed. Now it has to be an official exercise where the entire exercise is to collect data on population, details of topography of each assembly and parliamentary constituency in Jammu and Kashmir. And this is coming at a time when the NC National Conference and other parties where they have formed an alliance called Gupkar Alliance. Now they are poised to meet Prime Minister today, I think, or they are going to meet Prime Minister today in an all-party meeting. I think the delimitation process is going to begin in a short period of time, and this is one step towards initiating the delimitation process. So moving on to the next article, grey matter loss seen after COVID-19. So nobody understands at this point of time what are the long-term effects of COVID-19. See, we know that we lose smell, taste, some other senses when one person is infected with COVID-19 virus. But what we don't understand at this point of time is what are the long-term effects of COVID-19 in a person who has been infected with the virus. We know for a fact that we are going to lose certain senses like taste, smell, and we are also seeing large scale of lung damage. We are seeing certain exemplary cases of liver damage due to COVID-19. But what we don't know right now is what are the long-term effects when the COVID-19 infection percentage is very high. So in certain cases, if the infection rate is very low, we are seeing a quick recovery in the patient. But what is the long-term effect if the infection rate is higher than the normal in a patient? So as a part of those studies, when scientists were studying or reviewing brain scan images of certain volunteers who were measured before them contracting COVID-19 and post COVID-19 treatment, they are seeing that a certain loss of grey matter is taking place in brain. Now, particularly in the regions that is associated with smell and taste, and in those who had tested positive for coronavirus compared to those who hadn't. So it seems that there is a certain impact on the grey matter of brain itself due to COVID-19, which is a significant observation in and helps us in understanding the long-term impact of COVID-19 and maybe a better treatment protocol being developed to treat patients with higher infection rates to prevent certain loss of these kinds of losses in brain or something like that. When the scientists were asked whether this is a permanent change in a patient or not, it has been, they were skeptical, stating that the loss may be for a short period of time, the loss may be reversed, or may stabilize, meaning whatever lost further will not be lost, in that sense that it is going to be stabilized at a certain point of to a certain limit, or it may get worse, meaning we may see more loss of gray matter in certain parts of the brain itself. So this is significant in terms of understanding what would be the future course of treatments that should be developed post-COVID recovery. So nonetheless, this study is very interesting. Moving on, China prepares for CPC centenary events. So China, the ruling party, that is the Communist Party of China, will mark 100th anniversary of founding of the CPC. As a part of these arrangements, the Tiananmen Square, which is very a critical point in Chinese Communist Party's history, where young students who were protesting against the Cultural Revolution and the communism in China, rise of communism in China, were massacred indiscriminately by the Chinese Communist Party's army. That square has been closed because it's an inflection point in the Cultural Revolution of China, now the history of Communist Party. But nonetheless, in a short while, they are going to, I think it's in 8 days. Yeah, in 8 days, they are going to mark the 100th anniversary of the founding of the ruling Communist Party of China. And expect certain statements and certain rhetorical statements being made by Xi Jinping during that plenary that they are going to have. And we are going to see some interesting statements and postures coming out of China, and we are going to see the implications of that statement being played up in LAC and in Afghanistan. Moving on, Center further eases norms for voice-based BPOs. So India on Wednesday said that they are going to ease norms for governing other service providers or voice-based BPOs. Now these relaxations, which were far stringent earlier, are now being relaxed, and the distinction between domestic and international entities in particular had been removed. Where the domestic and international entities were treated in a particular way, now that distinction has been taken away and the consolidation will happen, meaning both the entities, whether it may be international or domestic, might be seen on the same page. Now the aim is to consolidate all these assets that are operating under different laws into a single thing, and enable certain synergy in the operation of different firms, so that there would be an equivalence in compliance to the laws themselves. And the removal of this distinction simply means that BPOs can leverage the same telecom resources to serve customers located globally as well as in the country. So what used to happen is, if you are a domestic entity, you can serve only domestic customers. If you are an international entity, you can serve only international customers. With this distinction taken away, irrespective of however you are identified as, you can serve customers anywhere in the world, including domestic or foreign countries. So that is the important relaxation in this particular norm. Moving to the next article, CCI probes Google for unfair business practices. Again, we just studied how the Competition Commission of India had ordered a probe into the practices of WhatsApp privacy policy or Facebook. Again, in lieu of proactive implementation of the legislation, the Competition Commission has ordered a detailed probe against Google for an alleged anti-competitive practice in the smart television operating system market in the country. The problem is, the smart television operating system that Google has been supplying to consumers has a condition that they have to have certain apps pre-installed in the OS. Now that goes against the laws of India. As a result of this, the Competition Commission has initiated that probe. The probe is initiated as per Section 4 of the Act, which contains or pertains to abuse of a dominant position, and that is why this probe has been initiated. That's it. We don't know what the outcome of the probe is, but nonetheless, Competition Commission of India is going after digital media platforms and digital media companies. Moving on to the next article, high raw material prices threaten survival of MSMEs. Now this article is very important. See, one of the sectors that Indian economy recovery is hinging upon is the bouncing back or the recovery of micro, small and medium enterprises. The PLI scheme that the government of India brought in, the production linked incentive, is directly, though they don't say that, but it is catered to MSMEs, or was to boost MSMEs or help in recovery or aid in recovery of MSMEs. And whether you like it or not, the entire Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, though may look like it is hinged upon big companies bringing in big investments, trust me, it is entirely dependent on how successful we are in nurturing and protecting our MSME sector. So, the increase in raw material prices in the last few months has and is playing or wreaking havoc on our MSME sector, particularly in manufacturing sector. So, this is going to see that or result in capital erosion because of high cost of inputs. So that is going to have an direct impact on their output and their employment levels also. And the price of the products goes up, and that means it's a knock-on effect because of the input cost. Now it is up to the government to set up a new mechanism to ensure that the raw material prices remain stable and do not fluctuate. That's the issue here. So you have to understand how important MSMEs are to Indian economy in short term and especially in long term. So moving on. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।